Hi, my name is David Lankus, and I wanted to quickly respond to some interesting comments, I think really useful and insightful comments about a new project we're working on called Reference Extract, which has been in the press recently, and of course our ongoing mission, if you will, about participatory librarianship and recasting libraries. The observation has been made that participatory librarianship talks all about connections, communications, conversation. The fact that learning is at the heart of what we do. The idea that there's a human connection and conversation that goes back and forth. And when people look at a lot of the discussion around reference extract as a product or as an idea, project that we're working on, they say it's a search engine. And search engines aren't about conversations and connections and human beings. They're about a bunch of stuff and finding things on the web. How do these two things relate? Are they related at all? Doesn't this seem like it's a betrayal of what we're talking about? And I think those are very fair criticisms. And if you really sort of hit reference extract from just the press release stuff, I can see how people could come up with that. However, what I thought would be useful is to walk you through how they're related and where they come from. And part of it is there's a missing piece. It's a piece we haven't built yet. We're sort of starting with little bits and pieces. So what I want to do is put them together. I want to go through just really quickly some fundamentals about how knowledge is created through conversation, which is what sits at the base of participatory librarianship, and then walk that through the different applications, both physical and digital, that we see being built from that. And I think going through that logic stream, once again, probably a little too much to go into a press release, I hope you'll see how reference extract fits into the larger picture. So that's my job here, is to link reference extract to participatory librarianship to show you how they're all connected, as it were. So I'm going to start with a user. Or I really like the use of the word member as the person who's at our library, who has a question, who has a thought, who has something that they're dealing with, right? So this is going to be our user. And our user has a question represented by that little circle in his head, or a gap, a cognitive gap, as Mike Nyland would say, or going back in the literature as Nick Belkin or Bob Oddie would say, or even Bob Taylor would talk about the idea of an unstated question. So where did this question come from? Where did this knowledge gap come from? Well, it came from a couple of places. One, it came from what they previously knew. That's what those dots are over there. They sort of knew about the world, and they encountered something that they couldn't use what they already knew to deal with. They discovered they had a gap, something else going on. That can lead to, that identification can come from inside, what's called intrinsic motivation, internal motivation. They sort of discovered it for themselves, and now they are motivated to go through and fix this problem, to fill this gap. Or, as often as not, extrinsically motivated. Someone sort of forced them to fill in the answer. So in an educational setting, whether it be an undergraduate or a 7th grader, that can be a professor or a teacher instructor assigning a task. You must know this. Go write a report on, etc. Or an employee, a boss says, we have to understand these things. But it can also be intrinsically motivated. I need to figure out how to drywall my kitchen because I want to save money, or whatever it is. And a combination of the two. I want to discover this to look good for other people. So there is this gap. There is this motivation to answer it. So how is this user going to go about answering that question? Well, once again, coming out of conversation theory and participatory librarianship, they're going to engage in a series of conversations. So what they're going to do, jumping ahead, is this person is going to, along the up and down axis here, they're going to explore a domain. This is sort of how they conceptualize the area that they're missing. And that domain will also, by the way, change as they go. But for now, just pretend they're going through a domain. And as you can see from the two horizontal lines, they're going to do this over time. And they're going to change what they know and their knowledge over time as well. And how are they going to do this? Well, they're going to engage in a series of conversations. So they may be talking to a bunch of different people, talking to librarians, talking to scholars, talking to friends, or talking to themselves, as we know through metacognition and critical thinking. They may be reading lots of stuff, and in the reading, they're not having a conversation with the author, they're having a conversation with themselves. They're taking this information in, relating it, seeing if they agree with it, seeing how it meshes with what they already understand, trying to come to some understanding. So they're going through these conversations, and through these conversations, they are establishing agreements, right? So that's what these little dots are. through the use of language. Now, I'm not going to go through all the basics of what is a conversation and conversance and language and memory and agreements and all that. There are other presentations, so I'm just going to sort of give you the quick Reader's Digest version of this. What they're doing through these conversations are coming through agreements. The agreements themselves are just connections they've made in their head. They're cognitive. They're things like 1 + 1 = 2, or more sophisticated, a catalog is how I find books in libraries. They're scaffolded together. That agreement may point to an artifact, a book where they read this. It may point to a common drawing that two people worked on together, and it has some relation to the conversant, to who else was involved in that conversation. Now, the reason that the words in that purple bubble are sort of fading is that we know over time artifacts and conversants will actually begin to fade out of your memory, but you'll remember the agreement. That's the famous, I know it from somewhere, I just don't remember where I heard it from, or have I told you this story before? But we have this agreement, we have these connections that go on. Now, we know that these conversations happen in a couple of different settings, and so just simplistically, let's say that they happen in a digital setting, online. They happen in physical settings, personal conversations, coming into a library, going into a classroom, and they happen in hybrid settings, like going to a library to search an online database. So they go on in a lot of different settings. Now, we know, what I'm going to start with is how we can take these concepts and apply them in, first of all, a library environment, because we know that this is going on all over the place and doesn't just happen in the library, but I'm going to look at when they come to that library, whether they're coming online or physically. And what we know is that we can build different systems around it. So we're going to build digital systems, hybrid systems, physical systems, and this is where we're getting to reference extract. And really the core system that we've been thinking about and conceptualizing and talking about to represent exactly what you see here is something we call scapes. And once again, I'm going to run through scapes really quickly. There are lots of other places on my blog and such that you can find scapes conversations, but let me walk you through it. So scapes is a piece of software, an online tool that helps this process, that is modeled on gathering knowledge and representing knowledge based on how people learn through conversation and not through reductionist paradigms of put everything in its bucket and talk about items and artifacts. So let me just run through scapes really quickly. Right? Here is the awesome scapes interface, which is the idea of an empty table. Someone comes into the library, they have a question, we sit them in front of a magic empty table. And onto this table they're going to begin sort of writing down cue cards with their agreements. They're going to put down books and materials, and they're going to draw lines between them. They're going to be able to invite people over to their table. So that's the metaphor. That's why it's empty. And the first thing is, so the example here is I hear a song, a Gwen Stefani song, and I'm pretty sure I've heard it before, and I think it's a remake. I want to go find out, so I boot up my scapes, and the first thing I do is a simple search. Now, remember this search, because you can probably already guess where we're going, which is where did that search come from, and what do we call that search, and reference extract. But for now, I do a search on a system. And I find this song, Rich Girl, and I drag that onto my scape. And I can, with that, I can look at sort of standard bibliographic stuff or things that came with that object that the library may have attached, such as its creator and the album it came from and a release date. And with simple software tools, I can create standing relationships. This song came from this album, and when I think about this song, I think about it in relation to the album. But that doesn't answer my question if it's a remake or not. So I need some help. So I'm going to invite someone into my scape. I go into a search box. This time I'm using that second icon, which is searching for people, and I pull in my friend Jeff. And I say, hey Jeff, have you heard this song before? And Jeff says, hold on. And he goes and does a search. Remember the search box. And he searches for the lyrics, and what he finds is another scape, as he says, and he drags that in. Now, with that object that he dragged in and related to that song, yes, it's got the lyrics, like that, but itself is a scape, meaning it has a bunch of relationships that someone else has built in. In this case, they have identified 4 lines out of those lyrics that they wanted to explore further. In my Galliano gown, clean out Vivian Westwood, see Stefani and her lamb, and I rock the fetish, and what do those things mean? And so in this case, I'd get me 4 Hayuka girls, they've gone ahead and explained that those are Gwen Stefani's backup dancers and linked them to a Wikipedia piece on that. But once again, still not answering my question, so what I'm going to do is I'm going back to my search box and I'm going to bring a librarian in. And I'm going to say, hey, I've heard this song before. Is it a remake? And the librarian says, actually, it is from a song from Fiddler on the Roof. I'm going to go ahead and add that information. Using the same tools available to everyone in this conversation, regardless of status, they go ahead and add that information, which looks like this wonderful knowledge representation diagram. Now, if this starts to look a lot like the previous graph I showed to explain how people think, that's not a coincidence, right? So instead of little bubbles, now I have little icons, but I still have lines between them, and they have descriptions like is a version of, and eventually you could have real descriptions like I think this is cool because of, and link two objects together. So we're all happy. We've got this information. I know it's from Fiddler on the Roof. They've even referenced it to a specific CD that has a song listing on it. So we all go away, but then Jeff's driving home late at night and he goes, I heard another song, can't believe it, she did another one, and he adds that information in. So the point here is, we've built this Scape. This is what Scape is about, building these conversations. It's interactive, it's online, it's about learning, it's about representing knowledge the way it's organically created. This is good, right? This is what participatory librarianship says we should be doing, not simple, boring old search engines. But let's go back to our diagram. What do we do with all of those relationships? When Scapes represents this relationship, it created this enormous, rich, linked, we would call it semantically aware, connections between objects and people and agreements, and it's made it so that it's computationally intelligible. Big fancy term, but it means that through computers we can manipulate it. We can search against it, we can draw it in screens, we can show it as transcripts, we can compute distance between, we can do all this kind of cool stuff. What should we do? Well, one of the things we should do is, if we extract all those relationships, we should be able to search on it again. Once again, where did that search box in Scapes come from? It came from extracting all the relationships from all the other Scapes that people had done. So where reference extract comes in is that it is in fact the search engine built on these relationships, these conversations. Reference extract itself, if all you look at it is a search and destroy mission, in other words, it's just a big box, I put in a query, it spoon feeds me results, yeah, that's not terribly conversational. But what it is it's one, an outcome of conversations, it's an outcome of participation, it's a result of a participatory process. But two, it also becomes an essential tool within the participatory process. Meaning, when I said the metaphor, I've got this table and I keep dragging things into it, where did I find the things? Well, I found it by searching something, and rather than just talk about searching catalogs or searching Google or searching these systems that have no conversational origin, I want to search that rich conversation participation stuff that I built in. And so, yeah, I may search Google or I may search reference extract, and Google may link into reference extract, but we need that essential tool to build this larger concept of participatory systems. All right, so that's the bridge. Reference extract comes from these conceptual linkage. Now, until we've built Scapes, until we have that piece of software, and we really want to build that piece of software, but until we have that, what do we have in the library domain that represents those rich conversations that are going on? And the answer is reference interviews and reference transcripts and people talking back and forth and pointing to resources, maybe not in the computationally intelligible way we'd like, but it's there. And so we want to extract that kind of data, and that's the first step for reference extract. As soon as Scapes comes online, that goes right into reference extract as well, and reference extract goes into Scapes. They're the twin parts. They're both necessary. Now, just because we're here, I thought I'd finish up talking a little bit of application, because at this point you see all those wonderful dots, and they all happen to be in the digital domain. Don't things happen in physical spaces, huh? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And so what happens is, as this person is going through and trying to learn about this domain, to understand and come to agreements, and they engage in physical resources within our libraries, they engage in physical resources outside of them, but in our libraries, what happens? And that's where work out of the Free Library of Philadelphia, when we began to talk about this, what we began to talk about is, instead of coming to the library as a big mass, coming to the library as these knowledge or topical centers, centers that are geared around a conversation. And in one case, we talked about entrepreneurium, geared around the conversation of economic development and business development. Another one was a writer center, where it's built around the concept of writing and how to promote writing and reading. Another one was music creation, which we'll talk about in a second. And so they go into these centers. And the reason they go into these centers is oftentimes they may, once again, have this gap. I need a business plan, but have no idea what the process is to go from a need to a solution. And so what these topical centers need to do is to provide a path, or if you want in an educational setting, a curriculum, a process, a pre-built conversation that people can vary from, adopt, and use, but at least they can regularly engage in it. And so that topical center doesn't just sort of, here's a bunch of books, go use them. It also has guidance to go through it, and that guidance can be structured. And that may take them to another topical center, and that topical center may take them to a digital resource, and you get the point. All right? And now these centers look very different. Rather than the business center looking like this, which is a lot of reading resources, bringing someone what we would talk about as an access issue, meaning I've made access available to a lot of these different conversations, but I haven't instilled knowledge, in other words, a process by which to decipher all of this existing information and access. I haven't necessarily created a safe environment, because if you walk into this environment and you know nothing about business, you may be so intimidated you don't feel like you could ask a question. That's not safe, right? And the other thing is, have we really recognized your motivation? Why are you here? Are you here because you have to be, or are you here because you want to be? Can we recognize your effort in such a way that makes you feel good about giving that effort? So instead of our business center looking like this, it needs to look something like this. This is what the business and entrepreneur folks told us. You know, it needs to be a place I can come in and I can ask for a business plan and be taught what a business plan is. And not only that, but once I have the business plan, I can network with the accountants and the lawyers and the venture capitalists I need. And not only that, but I can present the presentation here, and I can do the paperwork here, and I can do the copy of my slides, and I can do on field trips to successful startup companies. Instead of the music center looking like this, which is as a musician coming here to hear other people's music, it needs to start looking like this, which is a place where I can engage other musicians. And if you're talking about music, it kind of makes sense oftentimes to play it collaboratively, and conversations and language don't just have to be words back and forth. They can be music. And so our centers look very different because they're about the conversation and what we're trying to accomplish. So bottom line is we come back to this graph, and where reference extract fits in is that it tries to grab all of what's happening in the conversation and make it discoverable for the next conversation, for additional conversation. It's where if A to B to C leads you at a dead end and you're trying to figure out where D is, search is a good place to start. We know that. This is how the web worked, right? You can theoretically follow hypertext links to every page on the web, but that's not the most effective way to find stuff. We need the ability to search it. But can we do something smarter than simply this page links to this page? Can we get to this person linked to this artifact, to this person endorsed this object, to this object came from that object in a rich sort of semantic way back and forth. And that's what reference extract tries to get at, is those relationships. One application of that is search. Another one is a service that can be embedded in other search services like Google. This isn't the Google killer. Or MSN, Live Search or Yahoo or whatever. Or it can be embedded on, geographic systems. It can be embedded in Amazon for Reader's Advisory if they wanted to take this kind of information up. It should enhance things like Open WorldCat. It should be data that we could embed within catalog systems. All of these are possibilities. So I hope that gives a little bit of, from A to B. Because if you encounter participatory librarianship and then you hear about reference extract, it makes sense from the press release to go, well, wait a minute. This is about talking to people and knowledge, and this is about finding stuff. They're not the same. But when you look at it as a holistic system, in the big picture, you need both of them. Now, we need to build scapes. We need to build the topical centers. We need to have the theory. But we're going to start with reference extract. We hope. We're planning for it. We hope. So that shows you why we're headed in that direction. So I hope that helps. Once again, if it doesn't make sense or you don't agree with it, or you really want to make sure it does this, or how about that, please, please, please talk to me. Please talk to the group. Please use the comment features and email and call me up and whatever it is, because participation isn't just how people learn, it's how we do things. And, the only way that reference extract or escapes or any of these systems are going to work, or that we look at revitalizing our libraries from places of things to places of knowledge and conversation, is if we participate and feel ownership and collaborate. And so please use this as an invitation to get in there, make your own video, do your own text, whatever it is. So I appreciate your time, and I hope that's helpful. Thank you.